when you're witnessing to Mormons specifically, what avenue, what way of explaining the gospel have you found best for them?
So the thing about talking to our Mormon friends is the main thing is you have to teach grace, and here's why. One of my best friends, former Mormon, and the way she has said it is you can easily lead a Mormon out of Mormonism, but you will lead them into atheism. In fact, the statistic is really alarming. 80 to 90, depending on the statistic you read, 80 to 90% of Mormons who leave the Mormon church turn to atheism. And you can see why. They feel like they've been duped, they feel like they've been led astray, and that religion inherently must be corrupt because they've been lied to their whole lives, and they're angry. So the best way that I have found in reaching our Mormon neighbors with the gospel effectively is to remind them of grace. And so whenever we were talking to our LDS friends or they come to your door, it's reminding them of grace because they don't have a concept of grace outside of working for it, which is not grace. And so the thing that I always point them to is that I don't have to worry about how good my effort was or about how good my deeds were, or did I do enough good deeds. I remind them that my security, my eternal security, rests totally on Jesus. And when we remind them that, we talk about grace, we say things like, because we use the same terminology, right? Like they would use grace, we use grace. But the two graces mean very different things. Our grace means that even in our worst, so we go to Romans 5:8, right? Even while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. For them, that would not make sense. They would say, well, yeah, he died for us, but that only covers after we do everything else. And so again, it's really just that reminder that there is grace, 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 and it's not about works. They just don't have a concept, an understanding of grace outside of working for it. And that's what's so heartbreaking about it is they get close in some ways and they share terminology with us, but until they hear the gospel of grace presented over and over again, they're just not going to hear it. And the second thing is, whether you like the King James Version Bible or not, it really is helpful to use that text because they would say that's the only version of the Bible that is accurate, or at least as accurate as they claim it can be. So if you're quoting something from the NIV or NASB, ESV, whatever, they're going to go, oh yeah, but that's super corrupted, so therefore you're not understanding it correctly. So again, using same scripture you would use in any other situation, but using it from the KJV actually is more helpful than you would think. But it's that reminder of grace and pointing them to Jesus throughout the scripture where he talks about his grace. That's really the key is, and again, just be encouraged, and this is not going to sound encouraging, but I mean for it to be. On average, and this is just a national average, on average from first exposure to the gospel to if they come to know Jesus Christ, it's about 8.5 to 9 year span. Because it's relational. When you, even talking about grace, here's the thing, the Mormon church is actually full of members who are not practicing Mormons. They call themselves Jack Mormons. And what they mean is, I don't believe this stuff, but because it's so tied into my family, my social life, my job status, I'm going to stay in it. So they don't believe Mormonism, but they're not going to leave Mormonism. And so, in fact, the Mormon church in Utah is full of Christians who believe the Bible, believe Jesus Christ, but they're terrified of the implication of what it means if I leave the Mormon church. To be disassociated from my family, to be excommunicated from my community, to lose my job, to lose my home. I mean, those are things that are realities, not really in Texas, but in Utah, certainly. So it's a long answer, but the short answer is you just have to keep reminding them of grace and keep teaching them grace, 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 and that your works don't do anything, your works couldn't do anything, your works got you into this mess. And you can go into the doctrinal route, but really all they need to hear is grace. And then once they get that kind of figured out, you can kind of argue and go through the doctrinal differences and so on and so forth. And reminding them that Scripture, we believe, obviously, that the Bible is it. It's a closed canon, and it's the ultimate authority and final authority. They don't believe that. And so it's just having that conversation. But the best thing you can do is when your Mormon friends come to your door, answer the door and invite them in. That's the best thing. So.
just a simple addition to that, because my wife does world religion stuff, and this is also her forte, and she would kill me if I didn't say it. But their actual preferred term now is Latter-day Saints.
Latter-day Saints, correct.
Yep. And so they've also been told that if someone calls them Mormon, not to make it a big deal.
Right.
So it's probably not going to offend them, but I think just to use the terminology they prefer shows that relational aspect. But also then I think over time, in the next 5, 10, 15 years, as new generations come up and they're only referred to within the church as Latter-day Saints, Mormon's going to sound weird to them and probably be offensive. Even if they're consciously told not to be offended, it's going to be foreign because they're not going to hear it a lot.
Well, one more thing too. On that note, the president of the Mormon Church, Thomas Nelson, recently, earlier this year actually, came out and said that he doesn't even want Mormons or LDS people to call themselves that. They have 4 acceptable things they can call themselves. They can call themselves members of the church, members of the restored church, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so the full, or call themselves Latter-day Saints. Those are the only 4 acceptable terms that they're allowed to call themselves. And so we want to make sure that we, just like Jay said, we want to make sure that we treat them fairly and call them by what they would be preferred to be called. Otherwise, again, they're not going to be mad at, because they're not, we're not supposed to know that because we didn't go to General Conference. Well, I did, but I didn't get to go in. But anyways, it was great.
When they refer to themselves as Mormon to you, I just have a question on, like, if they say they were raised in a Christian home and then they converted.
Correct.
Or Latter-day Saints.
No, it's still called Mormon. I mean, you can call it that, yeah.
How would that be go back to grace? Just keep going back to
Yes. Yeah, and the good news is the Bible is very clear that it does not return void. You know, we're reminded through that it accomplishes exactly what it needs to accomplish, exactly when it means to accomplish it. And so if a person grew up in the church and heard the word, we can rest knowing that it's not departed from them. They've still got that. And so our prayer is obviously that they would recognize that truth and come back to it. That's obviously our prayer for that. But again, the best thing we can do, here's the thing, and you could ask 1,000 missionaries to get the same answer. What discourages you the most? Getting doors slammed in your face, getting called cult, getting called crazy, getting, all this kind of stuff. That's unhelpful. And you have to understand too that when we're talking to people, particularly in the LDS church, most of them, just like us, have grown up in it. And so it's all they know. And so when you're questioning their worldview, and they start to doubt that worldview, you're literally stripping away everything they've ever known. And it's heartbreaking, and it can be very traumatic for them. And so, again, approaching this with love and grace is the only way that you're ever going to make it happen. And invite them in and continue the conversation. That's what I would say.